I want to call the...
Recording in progress.
Wait for that. I want to call the May 29th, 2025 meeting of the Charter Revision Commission to order. We don't have any minutes to approve tonight. Jessica is doing a great job on like 500 meetings, so we give her lots of grace. Modifying the agenda. Maya, do you have a request that we switch?
Yes, I think we should review the meeting schedule first, so we get that out of the way.
And so if everyone okay with us reviewing the meeting schedule first? We have the last two meetings that we actually have on the calendar, not because we don't think we're gonna meet past June, but we've only scheduled the June meetings. So, and those are on different days. They're on Wednesday, June 4th, and Wednesday, June 25th. And they're not on our typical Thursdays because of conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought is, and everybody can say no or whatever, is to see if we want to get back into the first, is it first and third? What is our schedule? Is it first and third Thursdays?
Yes.
Yeah, the first and third Thursdays schedules again. And what I can do, work with Jessica on Monday to see if the first and third Thursdays work getting this room. And then we can review it again on Wednesday when we meet. Unless anyone wants to jump the gun and start telling me that they can't do Thursdays now.
The first Thursday in July is the 3rd,
Yeah.
which is the day before the 4th of July.
Yeah,
So
we don't want
that's
to do
the
that.
only date that I wonder if,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't have any problem with it, but
No, we should do it that
anybody
way.
else.
There's also 5 Thursdays in July, so
We can find another,
Yeah.
I can ask Jessica for other ideas.
Okay, so that would be maybe the 10th and the 24th or something like that.
I will say I'm out of town. The week of the 21st.
Okay. Of July?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm out of town the week of the 28th.
So the 10th and the 17th,
Yeah, that would work.
does that work?
Sure.
And I'll see if it works for, okay,
And then,
And then back to first and third in August.
yeah.
yeah,
And then we'll get the dates, I'll see what we can get, and then on Wednesday we'll look at them again, and if we need to make adjustments based
So that-
on all of the other work we have to do as well.
so that'll be in, August will be the 6th and the 20th.
the 7th and the 21st.
What?
We're going
Oh, on
Thursdays.
Thursday.
Yeah.
7th, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we might want to modify based on our schedule, because we're going to talk more broadly about the schedule and work plan going forward on Wednesday. So it all sort of is a perfect opportunity.
Okay.
That sound good? Okay, now we'll get to the matter at hand, which is our discussion on the form of annual town meeting. And because we have new faces and because there are some, I got an interesting email on Monday, somebody who watched our last Thursday meeting and asked me, why are we even looking at this and having this conversation? So I want to take a step back so that people who have no clue why we're doing what we're doing sort of get the background on it. The Super Reader's Digest version is, we were appointed by the Selectboard in December 2022. Per the charter has to be looked at every 15 years. So we've been working on this now for 2023, 2024, and now 2025. And we have been going through every section of the charter. The section of the charter that the most people in the public have come to talk to us about is representative town meeting. So we began talking about this in earnest in February of 2024. So this was one of the many things that we were looking at, but it's really public driven on the amount of interest in this. So that's, in a nutshell, what brings us here today. Because we were charged with a task, and we were doing the task, and we are listening. So last week, as we all know, we had an initial discussion about what our thoughts were, whether to stay with representative town meeting in any kind of way, open town meeting, or Australian ballot. And we had that discussion last week, and we decided to continue it tonight. So here we are.
I
And
guess
I think Maya
I'm on
wants
the
to
hot
start.
seat.
Maya wants to start.
I was one of the people at the last meeting who said I needed to think about it before I made a decision. So I've spent the week thinking about it and going through minutes and notes that I've made starting back. I think it's been on the agenda either 9 or 10 times. And in the beginning, we had a couple of meetings that were very well attended. And then they kind of dwindled off, and we talked amongst ourselves. And then we decided we had to do a real push to get some input. So I come tonight with a proposal that's kind of a hybrid. And I talked to Kate about this, and I said, I'll put it out there and it'll give everybody something to talk about. First of all, I looked at making a hybrid. And this works with either RTM in some modified form, because I think we heard a lot of people who wanted a modification of RTM if we kept it, or open town meeting, and Australian ballot. So one of those two and Australian ballot. And I went through and I looked at all the things that RTM currently does. And the first items we do are ratify the select board's appointments of the treasurer, town clerk, town attorney, accept the audit report, and employ an accountant and an auditor. And I heard a very good suggestion last week. I couldn't remember who made it, but that those things could be combined into a consent agenda. So there's one vote unless somebody objected. So those things take longer to read, I think, than they do for us to vote on, but it should cut down, 15 or 20 minutes to town meeting. The second thing on the for either open town meeting or RTM is to hear the report of the Human Services Committee and the allocation of the Human Services money. And I'm going to talk about that some more in a minute. The other thing on that agenda is the transfer of the unassigned fund balance, the election of a finance committee and a human services committee, and then to vote on the budget. On Australian ballot, I have listed any bond issues, which already have to be voted on by Australian ballot. And I think currently the Australian ballot is done at RTM. RTM members have to put a ballot in, have to vote on bonds. The amount of human services funds. Now, I know the select board tried to do something like that last year, and I thought it was very confusing, the percentage and the ranges and all of that. So if that's on the Australian ballot, I would propose that it be the actual money amounts be given. What's 3% of last year's budget? What's 2% of last year's budget? What's 1% of last year's budget? Rather than, and so people are actually voting on a specific amount of money, not some range that I didn't really understand. And I don't know if there were a lot of people understood it. The other thing on Australian ballot I have is this item of select board compensation. And the election of library trustees. The library always presents a slate, and those are the only people that we can vote on anyway, right?
No, they can nominate from the floor.
You can nominate. Okay, so they can have a write-in.
Mhm.
There are a couple things that I didn't know what to do with. One of them was the mountain home allocation. That's kind of obscure, so I didn't know whether that should be Australian ballot or go to the RTM or open town meeting. So I think that I've gotten some emails and about having some kind of hybrid situation, and I think that that's the best compromise that we can make. Now, I'm not saying that what I've put in the various columns is the last word or anything. That's my idea from looking at it. But I do think that a hybrid is the best compromise. Everybody's very emotional about this right now. And people weren't so emotional last February, to be honest. I went back and I looked through my notes, and I looked through, because I make notes of the meetings, and I looked through the minutes, and people had some really good ideas, and there were some people who did want to do away with RTM way back then. The idea of Australian ballot never really came up, as I recall.
No.
And so I think that we need to come to some kind of compromise. And I told Kate I would say this so that everybody would have something to talk about, if that makes any sense. So I think we should start with commission or the public.
Whatever anyone's pleasure is. I know that there are feelings from the people up here who might want to. We might as well just start, I think. I mean, we all want to start.
I am happy to share as well. I was one that also had tension. I am wrestling with what we should do, and I agree it's in a focusing moment due to issues that are out of our control. If we would have moved faster for whatever reason last year, this very different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So for all the reasons that were mentioned last week, I do not love Australian ballot. It's not debatable, it's not amendable. There's not a lot of nuance that can happen. I am between RTM and open town meeting. There's already votes that happen on Australian ballot, so then we can just say that we are already living in a hybrid. The information sessions are open to the public. There's a public section, and it is geared towards RTM, but doesn't have to be that way. It can be put in a larger venue. So there's a lot of ways that the town is already living it. And so I think, yeah, that is where I'm leaning.
No, are you leaning, I don't want to put you on the spot, Joy, but are you leaning more towards RTM or open? I want to ask Maya the same thing, because she has, that's like the big question. And Maya hasn't answered it either.
I was trying to avoid that.
You don't have to say right now if you don't want to. I'm just thinking I think that's what it's boiling down to here.
I think it might
Yeah.
take 2 votes
Mhm. Okay.
to come to the
Mhm.
consensus.
Okay.
I support a hybrid model similar to what Maya is proposing in order to both streamline and shorten the meeting, because that has been a consistent piece of feedback,
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not people like RTM, is that the meeting is too long and there's too much, it's too complicated, it needs some reform. And I would go a step further, and I would say that a lot of that stuff doesn't even need to go on a consent agenda. It can just be enabled to the select board, and it doesn't need to be voted on by the town.
Mhm.
Other towns do that, we can put it right in the charter. It doesn't, I mean, it's basically a rubber stamp, it's not really a discussion. And, I think that anything that does not lend itself to a debate or an amendment could be on an Australian ballot. And then I would think that the rest of it should go into an open town meeting. It would both make the meeting more accessible to more people, and it would allow more people to vote on more matters by moving some things to Australian ballot, so that that can be a town-wide vote for people that can't, or for whatever reason do not participate in the open meeting. And I don't think that we need to make a decision tonight on whether or not it would be a hybrid, or what needs to go on that hybrid format. I think tonight the big decision is, are we going to stay with the RTM, or are we going to go to open town meeting? And in either event, if we retain some sort of open meeting, there needs to be something done to make it a more efficient process.
I'll say. I was very uncertain at the last meeting. And after most people, I think, had left, Christina and Andy Davis said some things about RTM that have persuaded me that it can be reformed in a way to make it more accessible. I know people complain that they don't know who they're voting for, and there are things that we can do to make sure that people who are running for RTM have a biography of some kind that's posted publicly. And so there are things that can happen. I know that RTM is not perfect, but there haven't been any changes in how RTM runs and how people get elected and all that for I don't know how many years. Maybe since the beginning, I don't know. I know the last couple of charter commissions really didn't do anything with RTM. Dick may know.
There was one change, and that is that you didn't have to be put down if you were a Republican or a Democrat. That was really the only charter change for RTM meeting.
Yeah, so it's been a long time since anybody's looked at how it runs or how people get elected or anything like that. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. And that's where I'm coming down.
I made a really good speech last week that I wish I had taped it, or like, so I could just push the button, because it was right from my head there. For anybody who wasn't listening last week, I started saying that, I love representative town meeting, that my dad was town moderator for 22 years, so it was like, it was like a holiday in my family. So I started this in the, I love representative town meeting. But when we started a year ago, we had a lot of people coming in and telling us flaws in the system. And, one of the flaws in the system a year ago was that we were having a high percentage of people caucused in, because we weren't getting enough people running. So we actually had members of the public say to us, well, we should go from 140 members to 70 members. Kind of like, I never really liked that idea, because like
Go
that's
the other way.
Yeah, it should be, why are we making it less people involved in our town government? Then by the end of the year, I was in we should do things by Australian ballot. And then based on the number of people who ran to be representative town meeting members in March, I liked Australian ballot. Let me step back a minute, because to me, I think it's really important that whoever wants to be involved is involved, and that we open up, the process is open to whoever wants to be involved. I think that's really important. I'm very, feel very strongly about that. So then we had, you got came to March 2025, and we had twice as many people running for seats, which we haven't seen in a long time. And we know that because we had people come with the statistics back in February telling us it's been 10 years since, there've been any competitive election. So to me, the number of people we saw wanting to be representative town meeting members in March, I thought, well, why shouldn't everybody who wants to become a representative town meeting member be able to be a representative town meeting member? So, in all of that, and, we've had public comment for over a year now.
Over a year.
And I went back, the last few weekends and read it all.
Yes.
And to me, I think open town meeting is the way to go. And I find with the open town meeting hybrid, do what we can model. But, we don't know, and I don't want to make a decision based on a particular event that's happened once, So, we may, I got an email from Arthur Davis, I'm looking at Andy Davis, about, and he's not the only one, talking about, maybe we can have a system where if it's an empty seat, we don't caucus people in, but we have to caucus people in. You have to, Bob Fisher was in here telling us way back, there was a reason we have to do what we do. So, I don't want us to run the risk of not having enough people, what I mean, who want to run for it. So I am in favor of open town meeting, the open town meeting model, even though I love representative town meeting and it's like been part of my history in my life and everything. I really think that we've come to a point where the people who want to participate in town government should be able to. And I think that the best way to do that is through open town meeting, because we are a community who wants to get our say in. And I think going 100% Australian ballot is going to be very frustrating for us. And it's going to be something that we regret doing. And again, that's based on all the public comment we've heard since February 2024. There's been not one person has come in here or attended or emailed or that said to us, let's just do Australian ballot, we don't need any public comment, or we don't need any public input. Everybody, the number one thing everybody agrees on is there has to be public input. So I don't see any way to just do Australian ballot and have public input. So I'm on the open town meeting side of things.
I'm also leaning towards open town meeting for all of the reasons that have been stated, and also with the streamlining option of getting some things off the plate of the meeting and standardizing them for the select board. And even if we do change it, it's not set in stone. We can always revise, try it out for a few years and revise. It's not a 15-year commitment.
Right.
So I think we should try it.
I agree almost verbatim with what Kate said. I would phrase a couple of things differently that I think are important for us to consider. But I land in exactly the same place. I think both based on my own observations of town government, my own participation in town government, what we've heard from the public over the last couple of years about this, and some pretty deep reflection in what isn't working. I think that there's almost unanimous agreement that RTM isn't working in the way that it at one time was working better. And so if we did stay with RTM, it certainly needs improvement. It needs things that we might recommend that would be like structural changes, and then also in the way that we meet with one another as community members in the process. And I think it's both structurally and interactively, RTM could stand improvement. The most compelling thing that we've heard from the public in many different ways, it's the particular desire or particular advice of different individuals from the public have varied quite a lot, but the consistent thread that runs through, as Kate said, was that it's harmful to limit participation. That we have town meeting in Vermont so that we don't just rely on governing bodies, so that we don't just have the ballot box and then we get what we get, and then we can take action the next time we're at the ballot box. But we actually have this really amazing opportunity to come together as a community and, talk about hard stuff and make decisions together. And, we've been on a bit of a bumpy ride these last 6 months, but I think Kate and others have made the point of we need to be thinking about more than just the last 6 months when we make decisions about the structure of our government, the form of government. And I feel very strongly that that's true. And so that leads me to open town meeting. I thought I would be sort of unequivocally in favor of open town meeting instead of RTM. For what it's worth, and it's not part of the official decision-making process, and it may sound hokey to some of you. Others of you have known us since a long time ago. The emotional factor that Kate described of actually caring about RTM as part of her life since childhood, I totally understand and share. And I was away from town, some of you may know, for a long time after childhood before coming back 10 years ago to be the town manager, and then I retired from that 3 years ago and have been doing voluntary stuff since. And during my time as town manager, I actually became really concerned about RTM. It made me sad to see it not being as functional as it had once been. But I was concerned about that, and then I got to join up and do this together with these teammates, and have, based on the longer arc of our consideration that others have described, have landed really solidly in a place where I think open town meeting, and here's why. And that comes with an asterisk because of something we received from Arthur Davis earlier today, so I'm going to come back to the asterisk. I land there because I think in addition to other flaws, RTM's barrier to participation is not acceptable. I think that we have a community that we have come to understand pretty clearly is more diverse than maybe people thought, in terms of like the political movement sort of towards the left over a long period of time, demonstrated in different ways, socially and politically in town. Part of the dialogue of the last year has been really clearly like we aren't all of one mind, and we need to keep available the opportunities to come together and work through the things that we see differently, and hopefully arrive at places where we all can say, that isn't exactly what I wanted, but I feel good about how together we worked through something hard and we landed in a place. Maybe that's Pollyanna, and some nights or some Saturdays or some whenever we have those meetings, some of us are going to walk away and be more frustrated than that in that moment. But if over the longer run of things, we can actually stay getting into rooms together and listening to one another and wrestling with things hard and amending what's before us. Most importantly, getting to the point of my ramble, I don't want to go to getting all the big decisions made on Australian ballot, because we lose the opportunity when we've had that process of being a community and wrestling through hard things together. If we put all the big decisions on a ballot, we're going to lose the opportunity to amend it. I've listened to you, I've changed my mind, or I've listened to you and I realize, what, I can soften on this thing I thought was the right thing because that's so important to you. Maybe I don't even agree, but let's find a way together. And we've seen that happen many times over the years in ways that I thought were really good and important for the community, not just about the issue at hand, but because of the way in which it keeps us in community with each other. I think we really need to have a meeting. I land personally in the place that says we should have everybody who wants to be in that meeting be able to be in that meeting. For me, that's recognition of the desire that some folks in this room and some other of our community members who have expressed a desire for Australian ballot or for more Australian ballot. I think it's important the point that's been made that we have an Australian ballot already. That's how we elect people, and we make some decisions that way, but we haven't made very many decisions that way. And importantly, the budget and some other very big decisions get made when we're in a room together. So we already have this opportunity. We already have hybrid. It leans very heavily towards the meeting. I think there is an opportunity to be more efficient. I think, as Hannah said, there's unquestionably some things we don't even need to deal with at all. All these ratifications of appointments to positions and authorizing that there be an accountant, a certified public accountant to check the books. These are things that can either we can travel under state law or we can write them into the charter, but they're part of doing business properly in town, and we don't need to have those as items in the meeting. And to the degree that we have some other things like the validation each year of the exact amounts for the Mountain Home or the Tri-Park, that is something that needs to be done each year. That protects actually all the taxpayers in a way that's really arcane, and we don't need to get into it. But because there is an action like that needs to be taken, and because it doesn't need to be debated, then there's an opportunity to do that and perhaps some other things with a consent agenda in a meeting. I'd be concerned, that's an example actually of something I'd be concerned about putting onto a ballot where people who haven't engaged in conversation and inform themselves more fully about the array of things that we're dealing with in that particular year for town government might walk into the ballot box and see that and reject it. And I can tell you, rejecting it actually means that the taxpayers are all going to pay instead of the Tri-Park residents. The reason we have that item each year is so that the amount for that year can be identified accurately for the payment that's going to be made by Tri-Park residents for an improvement that the town helped Tri-Park to make many years ago. That's an example of something that's really granular and not that important in terms of the bigger scheme of things that we wrestle with as a community. I don't think it ought to be put up to a townwide vote because people ought not to have to know all the fine print details of that kind of a financial arrangement, and we don't want to make the mistake of voting no on it. So it feels to me like having a smaller group of people who have engaged in a process to learn more about what's going on and be participating in the decision making, deciding that one is better, and it can be on a consent agenda. We can make the meetings more efficient. There are other things we can do to improve the meetings. And so I think having fewer items for the warning each year, I think using a consent agenda, I think having some additional things, but in my opinion, not the budget, be put on Australian ballot. And then I lean to open meeting, but I think Arthur has raised a really interesting alternative that basically accomplishes open meeting, but in the representative town meeting structure. And I don't know, is he here
No.
to speak for himself?
He
He's not.
said he couldn't make it, that's
Okay.
why he sent us an email.
Saw Andy.
Yeah, Andy's here.
I don't know what
But yeah.
I know.
So I'm just gonna blurt out what Arthur recommended, the gist of what Arthur recommended, and I think there might be some magic in it. I do think we ought to do away with caucusing if we stay with RTM, and I'm intrigued by what you said about Bob's opinion. I haven't heard that. I think we need
haven't heard
to
that.
pursue that further with Bob, because I don't understand, maybe under the current charter, we have to caucus in. I don't understand why, if we're gonna create something that we recommend and the community approves, why that can't be something that says there is no caucusing.
No, well, I'm talking under the current thing, because I think we have to have 140 members, so you have to fill the vacancies.
Yeah,
Remember,
so I think we should, here's what Arthur's idea is, and I think there might be some magic to it. Keep RTM, because of the way in which RTM does require people to be interested and show their interest and make a commitment. I'm gonna go to this meeting. I make an advance commitment. I'm not just gonna get concerned about it the week before the meeting and go to the meeting. I'm personally not that worried about that. I think that's part of the democratic process, that sometimes people get excited about something late. I'm much more concerned that we be in a room and having the conversations and doing the work together. But there are people who are concerned that groups of people can rally people who think like them and fill up the room, and some people can come to that at the last minute. And I think there is some risk of that. The counterbalance to that in the discussions has been keep RTM, because people have to make a commitment to RTM. I think that's right, and I also think it's right that the electoral process for RTM is kind of a farce. We most often don't have competition, and when we do have competition, it's hard for people to make a choice. People don't know all 30 people on the ballot for 17 positions, as one example of how it went this past year. So Arthur's idea is expand the meeting so that it is, he said 200, I would say maybe even 300. Make it a large group of people that will almost never have competition at the ballot box. It'll be functioning like open town meeting at least 90% of the time, in the sense that people who want to participate will have the opportunity to participate. We lower the barrier to entry. And we can talk about the details of how do you get on that ballot, and make it so that we don't set up unnecessarily cumbersome systems. So we really, if our intent is we want every registered voter who wants to be a part of this process to be able to be a part of this process, then we ought to make sure that it really is as easy to get involved as possible. But you make your commitment ahead of time and you become an RTM member. And if we did that, if we had a doubling of the size of the seats and eliminated any opportunity to caucus, then everybody in the room is somebody who will have made a commitment ahead of time. There is no opportunity to put a bunch of additional people on, the day of the meeting or the week before the meeting through caucusing. Except in a very rare occasion where you might have, more than 300 people who want to be involved. We were having some very speculative discussion last week around like, what might it look like to have an open town meeting? There are some people who are concerned that we won't have a room large enough in town to do that. I think that's not right. We have places where 1,000 and more people can come into a room. I think we've got plenty of room for the number of people who will actually show up for one of these meetings, and that's why I think open is good. But I could support, if we hear some support from y'all, and if we generate some support here on the dais for it, I could support this idea that creating something that is essentially an open town meeting, but retains the advance identification of I'm somebody committed to doing this work together with you. I could see that could be an alternative to open town meeting that's worth considering. That's not my point.
Hannah?
Hannah.
Well,
I believe I am the only person on this committee who is not a member of RTM.
Yes.
Am I wrong on that?
no, I think you're
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
Yep.
And I just really want to push back against that because I am someone that I would like to think is engaged in what's going on in the town. I'm participating. I am following the issues. And in both the situations where there haven't been enough people to fill the ballot and in the situations where there's more than enough people, it has been equally discouraging as a voter. Because I actively tried to find out who was going to be on my ballot. I couldn't find out. And in years where there weren't enough people, I also couldn't find out, and I didn't even fill it out. It didn't even matter what I did, and I think there are people where even that low level of saying like, get my name on the ballot and having to plan ahead of time is a barrier, and you're losing the opportunity to get people that are engaged and are interested that would participate in the meeting and add a lot to it, and I lost my train of thought there, but yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember where I was going with that, but I just think that it's important to make sure as many people can participate as possible, and really any barrier to entry is going to prevent people from participating. And I think that the level of engagement we've gotten recently on this issue, on this committee, shows that people might not be aware of what's going on, but all of a sudden they care.
Mm-hmm.
And just because someone didn't care 6 months ago and now they do, like, that shouldn't foreclose them from being able to participate.
Thanks. I don't disagree with any of that. I said I favor open town meeting. It was. We haven't in any other part of these discussions talked about keeping representative town meeting and having it expand rather than contract. And I found Arthur's idea very interesting because of the way in which it tries to capture the advantages of both types. And when it comes down to it, if we don't land there, I believe we should have an open town meeting.
Yeah. Oh, do you want to say something?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think that there are things that can be done to make it easier to run and for people to find out. I said last week, and I'll say again, the League of Women Voters and Tom Franks tried to do this thing where everybody that was running filled out a form. And there were people running in my district that I didn't know, and they didn't fill out the form. And I think that is a big issue with RTN. I think I had the same problem you did. I voted for the people that I knew, which is not a good way to vote, I think. But we haven't looked at, as I said earlier, we've never looked at how people get on the ballot or how you get elected or how you run since the beginning of RTM. And David Levenbach has raised
Yeah.
his hand.
Yeah, what I want to ask the public to do is just, for the camera and for the minutes, say your name every time you speak.
Can I
Oh,
propose
yeah.
that no one gets to speak twice until everyone's
Oh,
had
yeah.
an opportunity to speak?
Yes. We'll go through. Yes. We'll start in the back with you, Randy.
So Randy Blodgett, District 7. So, little minutia. So I'll look at Arthur's when I get home where it's easier. Is there a mention about quorum in that? Because, and I don't know if we can build that in the charter, but if you're gonna have a floating number or whatever, and you're not gonna caucus, if that's part of Vermont state law, open meeting, you know, I'm not sure, but that would need to be addressed. And all I'm gonna say about caucuses, I'm probably more involved because of the caucus. We can call it a different name, but I've met more people in District 7 at multiple caucus meetings that were, if they weren't the official town caucus where you're caucusing people in, we got together because there was interest. Who went to this? What do you know? What's your opinion? And I mean, the one before the informational meeting, the week before that meeting, we had one at Academy School. Hey, we had 36 RTM members there and 10 public. We got a lot done at that meeting. So I'm not for throwing it out with the bathwater. We can call it a different name. I know the town doesn't want to support that. I've been told, or we were told at the last thing, that the only caucus is the caucus, the information meeting. Otherwise, it's not really a caucus. And that's fine. But I think the town should be supportive, be able to put up, hey, District 7 interested citizens are getting together once a quarter. Here's the date. At least that's what we're planning on doing, right?
Yeah.
'Cause-
Sure.
So if we can incorporate that as, you know, my feelings have changed on that since the library where I
Yeah.
gave my hybrid ideas, which are in between kind of what everybody said. I still feel, I think the whole town should get to vote on the ballot. I like the modified idea, have amendments, do stuff, but that final thing, I think everybody should get to vote, that there shouldn't be any encumbrance.
On the budget?
Yes, just on the budget, at least, and some of the other things that were easier, faster, and I love the consolidation with the consent agenda, because if we can get rid of that and there's more time to actually talk.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I asked Kate to just allow me to make a quick clarification, and then we need to hear from other public, but I just want to be really clear. I 100% agree with you about the kind of meetings that aren't the caucuses that happen on information meeting night and the morning of town meeting, to caucus in people who then get the full voting participation of all the people who put themselves on the ballot. It's that caucusing in of RTM members that I'm concerned about, not, I love the meetings. I think we need more of those kinds of meetings. We've been having some in District 9 as well, and it's really healthy that we're having those kinds of, you know, a few dozen people, several dozen people getting in a room together, talking things through, not agreeing, but finding ways to learn from each other. You're 100% right.
And it should be 5 or 10% of the registered voters or town public, whatever number demographic you want to use, should be open to be part of the voting by, I have no problem with saying at a certain point during the year, I would like to be in this process, and whatever you have to do that, obviously. You've given people a chance. You know, I don't think we'll ever have more than that based on how things are currently.
Thank you.
Well, let's go to David on Zoom.
Thank you. David Levenbach, District 9. I want to start by saying that I was very appreciative of Tom Franks and the League of Women Voters survey. And I don't know that we can necessarily rely on him to continue to do those. There is a little bit of the trick of who formulates the questions. I think it is reasonable to say that the town clerk would require a bio from each candidate. And I think it would be, and I don't know how you put this into the charter, but that questions could come from, 3 or 4 questions from the Commons and the Reformer. What I would also suggest, if this is at all legal, is to say that people who do not respond to the request for bioinformation and responses to the questions, however bad the answers may be, would be struck from the ballot. That this is a requirement to be on the ballot. And then I see the lawyer's not real happy with that, but okay.
Yeah, it's not even worth discussing.
Okay, well, that's fine. The other thing I will say about the Arthur Davis, Peter Elwell's suggestion of expanding RTM is when we had the League of Women Voters survey, I went through the people who did respond and as much as possible tried to vote for people because there were some people I wanted to block. And based on some of the controversies that were going on last year, if you have an inflated number of seats so that anyone who wants to run, you lose the opportunity to vote against people you don't want to be in that body. So with that, I'll let you all go. Thank you.
And we'll go Andy.
All right, I'm Andy Davis, District 9. I also sent you all an email today, so it went to the your committee email, and it had a lot of details about some of the issues that we're talking about. One of my concerns, and I may be wrong about this, but there were 260 responses to the survey.
Yep.
That's about 3% of the eligible voters. So in some of the articles in the paper, there's reference about 66% feel this way and 78 and 62, but that's all within 3% of the eligible voters. So I'm a little bit
Andy,
concerned. Yeah.
We didn't, you weren't required to be an eligible voter to do the survey.
Fine, okay. But I'm just saying that the sample, I did a little research, Googling, and that number of self-selected people is not considered a scientifically valid result. All right. So I am a little bit concerned about whether we have a mandate for this. I'm also concerned about if we turn away from RTM to the hybrid idea without actually spelling it out. That's a little bit like jumping off a diving board without knowing if there's any water in the pool. And I would actually, if we do go, the town decides to go to open meeting, just have the open meeting do the work that RTM has done, and then in the next year or so, present articles to change consensus agendas, moving to put more things on and let the town make that decision. But to make a decision that we're going to go to hybrid and just leave it at that, I don't think that's wise. I'm also wondering what would happen to our RTM Finance Committee, which has been a very vigorous part of oversight in the town budget, and I don't know how that would run if we got rid of RTM. And also, I think the social services component would also need to be rebuilt from the bottom. And I think that those are both big issues for me. I've heard references throughout this debate to acrimony, or a couple people at some of the meetings have said, I've never seen the debate get so. I'm just going to be honest, I haven't seen it. Compared to what's going on in the world today, I think RTM is civil discourse. I end up chatting with people who I disagree with, sitting and having lunch with people, talking about the issues. I think it has continued to work that way very well. I'll just end with a couple of questions that maybe you or other people can bounce off here. Peter Elwell, you mentioned concerns that were sort of growing in you, but you didn't mention any specifics. I would love to hear some specifics of what was concerning you about the direction RTM was taking. And I'll finish with just saying about the current situation, which has been a big meal for any town government to deal with in the last year or two. I still ask the question, what hasn't worked? We rejected and then compromised and passed a budget that nobody was particularly happy with, that still left challenges on the plate. And we compromised on the resources for public safety. And if we had kept the ordinance, one of the main people in executing that ordinance was to be the assistant town manager, that we no longer have as a position. So I think when I look at the difficult decisions that we faced in the last couple of years, I get the part about opening the door to everybody, and I would enthusiastically attend an open town meeting, and I would vote at any Australian ballot thrown in my direction. But I have yet to hear somebody say about the current struggles we've had, what didn't work, specifics. Thank you.
Christina and Joe.
Hold on. Did you want to answer him's question now, or do you want to
We
wait?
should hear it.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go Christina.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Christina Shea, I'm a District 8 rep, and yeah, so many things, but I think the main one is that, man, what Andy just brought with that your sample size is not even scientifically relevant is kind of what I've been sitting with, is that I ran for select board. I got really used to talking to strangers. I'm kind of annoying like that. And everybody I've asked, you know, at the, what is that dancing called with the bells? And
Morris dancing.
and the car meet and all the things. Like, did you know that RTM's on the chopping block? What? No, it's just that most of this town doesn't even know this decision is being made. So there's no right way to do it. There's problems with open town meeting, there's problems with RTM, there's problems with Australian ballot. There's no one right way. But the process is what I'm really concerned about. This is the majority of 260 people is hardly a critical mass to dismantle our municipal government. As you mentioned last week, RTM is throughout the charter. You are dismantling our system of government at a moment when the federal government is also being dismantled, where things are being pulled out from under us, and also at a moment where our town just defunded 5 different support staff in our municipal government, and you guys are talking about completely changing how we govern Brattleboro. And all of that sets off alarms for me. Like I said, there's no one right way. I'm a little bit skeptical of people who are so adamant about, like, we need to get rid of RTM. I honestly wish that you had some demographics on your survey about who those people are. But again, it's not even scientifically
I'm gonna say something about it. I just want to go back, because now Andy and Christina mentioned the survey. The survey was just one little thing in a whole year's worth of information that we've collected. The survey is not the driving factor at all. You know, we put that out there in a way because it was one other tool based on, again, a year's worth of collecting information. So I don't want anyone to believe any of us are putting all of our weight on that survey. It's not any weighted any more than anything else. I just want everyone to understand that.
I just mean in input in general, that there's been no articles in the newspaper that this is even happening, like the outreach. And for you to make this change based on the idea that everybody should have a say, I find even harder to swallow, because why don't you model that? You know, like how are
We've been listening for like literally
I
over
know,
a
but
year.
I'm just here to tell you that this happens on this table, where it's like, come to us, let's, you know, like, you can only reach so far from that table, and outside in this giant town, most people have no idea that this conversation is even happening.
Can I just say one thing? When this conversation is over and we've arrived at whatever recommendations we're going to make, the town
It's gonna vote.
voters are going to decide whether or not we change our form of government.
Right, it's not us.
So there's other members of the public that are waiting to hear. I think there's some really robust conversation we could have about some of the things that you just
Okay.
mentioned.
Can I-
And I think, just bottom line, I want to make sure everybody knows we don't decide. We recommend, and we've been working on it for a long time, and we are coming to some clarity around what we are thinking we're going to recommend. And you can see we're not there yet on this one huge fundamental issue. But when we get there, you and several thousand other people are going to decide whether or not we change town government.
Can I finish my, I just wanted to,
I'm
because I know
sorry.
I'm not gonna get to speak again, so I just wanted to say that there are a lot of reasons to get rid of RTM. And if we had open town meeting, there would be a lot of reasons to get rid of open town meeting. And the reasons that I want to point this out, this is really important because one of my expertise is access. So the reasons for open town meeting that I'm hearing from you guys are really beautiful and idealistic, and in practice, that's not how access works. You're basically saying, like, let's open it to everybody and then everyone should be able to access it. Well, first of all, you're maxing out at about 10% of everybody. So that doesn't really add up. Second of all, if you think of it as like a finish line, being at open town meeting would be being at the finish line. You're having a vote. If everybody were starting at a start line, then that would make sense. That would be like, yay, everybody's at the start line. But as we know, through systemic inequities, not everyone starts at the same line. So you're going to open town meeting, but we ended up at RTM to address inequities that exist at open town meeting. Because that flag behind you, that American flag, that's for landowning white men. So I know that we feel like in Vermont, like we don't have the racism, classism, all these issues, but there are systemic issues that make RTM more equitable than open town meeting. And I'd like to hear how you are going to make open town meeting equitable and not just be landowning white men or their ancestors and wives.
We'll go to Dick because he keeps, we're gonna let everybody talk and then we'll address all of this stuff.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna go, I know, I'm gonna go Dick first because he's been waving his hand.
Well, thank you, and thank you, the committee. A lot of hard work and time. I went through one of these the last time we did it, so I know the effort that you're putting into it. A couple of things that I've heard. This year, I believe, was an anomaly because we had a lot going on in our community starting in late January that really got people fired up and wanting to, a couple of issues. One was the human service budget, which really ignited a lot of passion, one way or another. And so that really propelled people to say, I'm gonna get involved. I'm always concerned about people that get involved in one-item issues and wanna run for something, and whether that's RTM or that's Selectboard. I had said to Peter, and I had had a brief conversation with Kate about a hybrid of keeping RTM with some restrictions. I think you should look at term limits. I don't know if you've ever talked about those. But I definitely believe that the big ticket items should be brought to a townwide vote. The town budget, after debate at RTM, should automatically go to a townwide vote to ratify what RTM does. I really don't feel like RTM is representing the taxpayers. We like to think it is. We call ourselves representatives, but I saw 15 people abstain from the vote. Did they talk to their constituents and say, well, if this doesn't happen, I'm a no-show on the vote, I'm voting. And I really thought, that's not what representative government is, in my definition. And so I believe, now I thought about actually, I heard Andy say, well, you know, RTM sent the budget back with no real direction. I thought that was wrong, but they did it as an observer and a close observer. And then the board, in its infinite wisdom, said we're gonna go back with a 10.5% increase. And there really wasn't any discussion on Tuesday. There was one motion which I thought was out of turn, but somebody at least made a motion. After that was defeated, it was like, I gotta get home and watch CNN, it's coming on at 9 o'clock. And I'm sitting there in the back listening and I'm going, I know there's an impact. If I was gonna go out and get a petition, but I knew the impact of, if I got the signatures, which I believe I would have, it would have impacted the taxpayers. And I felt that okay, I'm not going to do that because I don't need to hurt the taxpayers any more than they just got hurt at this meeting. There are a lot of people who are really struggling. And I believe, maybe one other time, that RTM has sent the budget back to, so that was really an anomaly also. So it can happen, but I doubt if it's going to continue to happen. But what should be happening is that the taxpayers who feel really, really frustrated, and they're really feeling frustrated after what happened on Tuesday, is that they go, I don't have a say in this. I don't have a say in this, which goes to the open meeting that you're talking about. But I believe in RTM, but I believe there needs to be ratification on the big ticket items. Some of the other smaller items that you're talking about, the people don't, I've never met somebody who said, geez, I'm disappointed, but we appointed as town attorney. You know, those things are irrelevant. A lot of things that you do in the preamble, but they are concerned about big ticket items which affect their pocketbook. And I think for us not to do that, if you're not going to do that, then you need to lower the threshold for someone to take it to a townwide ballot, because what's it now, 5% of the registered voters? So you need to go out and you need to lower that threshold, considerably lower, at least 250. That would be a lot easier for someone that says, I want to challenge something that was passed at RTM. And people don't even know that they can do that. Any article at RTM can be challenged, and when I had mentioned it on some Facebook post, people went, you can? And so we really, as much as people are engaged, we have an uneducated public about the way that our government is running. And that's no disrespect to anyone. They don't have time, they're not immersed in it. We need to find a way to get more people to vote. I mean, look at what's going on in our election every March. And to your comment, Peter, about 1 week, we elect new people and they're there for 2.5 weeks, then they're going to RTM. So maybe you change the election date for RTM members. Instead of doing it in March, why can't we have an election in November and let those people get educated? There's nothing that says we have to do it on that first Tuesday in March. So if you're going to do that, you change the date, you let people get educated, let them get tuned in, and so I would think about that. But I would really strongly encourage you to say, we need to get the big ticket items, whether it's a bond vote, I agree, you know, the human service budget, which is having a financial impact, and, you know, certainly the budget. Those items need to automatically go to Australian ballot. And, you know, I mean, there's things on both sides that I don't disagree with, but those things I really feel passionate about is letting the people that have to pay the ticket items say, no, I can't live with that, because I can tell you unequivocally, if this happened in March, that it was a 10% that passed, we would have gotten a petition out there, and this budget would have failed, and it would have gone back to the select board to redo. That's where I feel with RTM that the taxpayers really aren't getting represented. I love the debate, that's great, but as someone said, in the last 10 years, my observation is RTM has kind of gotten cliquey. We're trying to recruit people, as we do for Selectboard. People get recruited. We're recruiting RTM members to run. Hey, run for RTM, just like when you do in the caucus. Hey, Christina, we got an open seat. You think like me. And one thing I have said from day one is that you are recruiting people who think like you. You don't go out and recruit someone to run for a position who has a totally opposite view that you do. So we're trying to get all of the same ilk thinkers together. And that's not good representative government, not in my eyes. And we do it with the select board, we do it with school board. Hey, why don't you run, we got an open seat. I know you're gonna vote with me most of the time, so that's who I want. That's not good government for anybody. So there's a lot of people that wanna talk. I rest my case.
Jill, Jill Stahl-Tyler.
You're still muted, Jill. There you go.
Okay, so you can hear me now?
Yep.
So I'm going to agree with a lot of what Dick just said, and I'm one of the people that went out and recruited this year. I want to make a comment about that process. When I talked to probably 100 people about running for RTM, seriously, probably about 100 people, I got about 80 people that turned me down cold and said this: there's no way I can expose myself and my business to what I think, what I would like, because my business would be blackmail. They just don't want anything to do with putting their own voice out there. So the way that we're running it now, we are definitely not allowing all the tax people to actually have a say. That's just the reality of RTM. I think the idea of the debate is great. Personally, when I go into RTM and I listen to people talk, I don't usually change my mind. But the conversations beforehand in the paper, and in personal conversations ahead of time when we know there's an issue, yeah, I do sometimes change my mind. I definitely see different things. I don't know, when people say hybrid, I feel like there's a lot of different versions of that. But I think it's great to have the idea of having conversations and communication and having meetings, and people can be informed. BCTV is great, Zoom's fine, but we can all hear things. We don't even have to be in the same room, and then we can be very educated voters when we go to an Australian ballot. But it's a lot of decisions that are being made by a very small amount of people. And specifically this year, there were a couple votes that were actually on the ballot that RTM members didn't respect. So it just feels like this process is not working for us. And I'm intrigued by some of these other ideas. I think an open town meeting is intriguing, but I don't know where you can physically hold that if you actually have people. Sure, there were a lot of people that ran this year because there were some hot button issues, but also because I think other people were frustrated with RTM not listening and not representing their thoughts, so they came forward. Anyway, thanks for doing all of this. I don't know that there's really fast and easy answers.
Thank you. We're gonna go right down the line. Millicent, yeah.
Millicent Cooley. Am I supposed to say my district or anything like that?
Whatever you want.
I think I heard Peter or somebody say you have not yet discussed the process, much about the process of electing representatives, and if that's true, I would like to see that discussed.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of details around that. And when I first became a rep, the first question was like 4 or 5 years ago. First question I asked when I went to the town clerk's office was like, how do you do a good job at this? Like, what is it? What does it mean to be good and at doing this? And I was told, talk to 10 people, and that never satisfied me. And because I could talk to 10 people and the same 10 people next year, you know, or they could be 10 people just like me. So and I did also, I agree, I liked the bios that appeared for some of the reps this year. I would love to see that, and I agree with David's challenge that it's like, what questions do you ask? Which gets back to the question of, you know, what does it mean, you know, what do we want reps ideally to do? Because that would help drive what those questions would be. So that's one. I noted Maya's idea about making the human services amount public. I'd never thought of that. And I haven't thought about it deeply because I just heard it for the first time. But I I don't have any instant like alarms about that. And my impression of that particular discussion is that there's a ton of hot buttons and discussion around it, and not much new gets said about it. It's the same people who feel very strongly about the same things. So seeing it public might be, I would be open to that. I also, it sounds maybe, I don't know, being too exclusive, but I've seen a few people voted out, like I can think of 3 people, and they were on both opposite ends of the political spectrum. That to me, improved the tone at RTM in the meeting was improved for not having those individuals there. And so having, and not leaving, and you could, if it was completely open meeting, it would be entirely up to the moderator to handle that. Okay, when you have a voting, the bar's pretty low. If you can't get in right now in the current circumstances, you're very, very unpopular. Very. And, okay, so that's 3. 4, I agree about the question Andy raised about what to do about RTM elected committees. There's 4 of them. There's finance, there's human services, there's one that's partly appointed by
Capital Grant Review.
Yeah.
We're recommending that go away.
Okay, yeah, so what to do about those? And then finally is a question, and that is, so this commission is every 15 years. Is it possible, is there some structure or some way to make like sort of continual improvements? For example, if we decide to have an open meeting, is it possible to try it out for a year and then see how it goes and learn from the actual fact, and then come back? Like, we had that steering committee, which was a disaster and ended, but and needed to end. But I think that there was a desire to have some way of having, like Andy Davis, I'm sorry to pick on you, but it's talked about, could we have a more of a place to eat together, like where do you even put those ideas?
Yeah.
And so there's these, is there a way that we can, is there any structures that are possible to make improvements a little bit more continually than once every 15 years?
It's at least every 15 years.
Okay, but no.
So it could be,
Right.
Yeah,
And there are other mechanisms
And there are other
for
mechanisms.
amending the charter.
Yes.
Besides this commission.
And there, in fact, have been
But
charter
they're
amendments in the last 15 years. So what you're advocating for absolutely can happen. The Charter Commission only gets appointed when 15 years have gone by, or like up to 15 years have gone by, and there hasn't been one to do the thorough soup to nuts review.
Okay, but taking Andy's like idea, for example, like lunchroom, can we rent the lunchroom and make it so people eat together? It's hard to envision that we're gonna go through, a bunch of people are gonna go through the steps that it takes to
Right.
make an
Right.
amendment to
No.
the charter
No.
to make that happen.
And Millicent, a lot of what you're talking about, and a lot, because as you know, I was on the steering committee too.
Yeah.
A lot of what you're talking about are not charter things. Like deciding we're gonna eat lunch in a lunchroom is not something for the charter.
Yeah.
That would be, it might be a decision the select board or somebody might, I don't wanna go into how it would happen, but there could be another steering committee that makes recommendations like that. So our job is sort of like a bigger, this is what we're gonna do, but and there's some things we can put in the charter, but we don't wanna go through the
Well,
charter,
I guess what I'm getting is when people are saying there's lots of little flaws, is there a structure for working continually on those lots of little flaws?
Well-
And maybe it's like, okay, some of them go to the select board, some of them go somewhere else, but like, right now, it doesn't feel like there's
Right.
a great container for that.
right, I think Hannah was.
I just want to make a point, just responding to some feedback we've been hearing. This is not the end of this process. This is a keystone decision that's going to impact a lot of other decisions, which is why we have to make it at this stage. And so a lot of these things about what does a hybrid meeting actually look like, you know, what do we do with these committees? All of that will depend on this decision, and so we are not at the end of this process at all.
Right.
Those are all decisions that will come after this, but they're not something we're able to discuss until we know what form of meeting we're going to recommend.
Right, so basically, the message Hannah's saying is, after this meeting, you need to keep coming to all of our other meetings. Because at all of our other meetings, we'll hash out all these little details. Because we have a giant list of, we have a chart, we have a chart. We're gonna go here and then we're gonna come back. Timothy.
Greetings, Timothy Belknap, District 9. I just wanted to say thank you all very much. We're hearing some super brilliant ideas from everyone in the room. I did want to just say I do take a little exception to the idea that people don't know what's best for them, and that only an inner circle can be educated to understand that. And the other thing is regarding your survey. You guys did a brilliant job. I think I saw it on no less than 5 separate platforms that you guys advertised for that. Okay. Yes, I did sit down and I analyzed it with the general idea that, yeah, 260 people, I'm going to tell you, 260 people of 9,000 voters. Yeah. Is that a fair sampling? Maybe not. But if we think about it, that's 100 people more than the RTM. And we are mentioning here why people became involved. I went to a particular meeting on 12/12 last year. The smoke came out of my ears, and that's why I'm involved, because I saw a gross miscarriage of the RTM. And I would say it's inherently flawed that any one group can just take things over and influence that. Now, I know we don't need to touch on that, but I just wanted to mention that. And I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to the commission for the work that you guys are putting into this. And
Can you say your name?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Tom Grasso, and I'm a Brattleboro citizen. I also happen to be perhaps one of the few reluctant representative town meeting members. I did not run for election the 2 times I was an RTM member. I joined because somebody said, "Hey, we have empty seats. Can you jump in?" And I felt it was, at the time, my civic duty to do so. I have a job that makes it very difficult to do this sort of thing often, but I felt it was important to do. I submitted a proposal for a hybrid to the reformer. They printed it. Happy to share it with you again, but I'll save my breath for that. I do think there is a problem with the idea that it's only the people in this room that get to decide what the answer is, right? And I do think that debate and discussion is important, but people learn about things differently, right? Some people read things and they decide things from reading it. Some people have discussions with people and they learn from what other people say. Some people decide things whatever way they want. I have a mother who was very involved in local politics. She read voraciously, she talked to people, she ran for office. Her mother came to this country as a 17-year-old nanny, didn't read or write English, became an American citizen, and had the right to have her opinion in the ballot box counted. And I think what Dick is saying is that we should have these discussions, but in the end, everybody, when there's fundamental issues affecting everybody in the town, it should be done by a townwide ballot. And there's a reason why we have a private ballot, because people don't have to share their views. Some people don't want to. And so I think it's really important that if we're going to make some changes here, and I think we do, in the interest of democracy, and the reason that we're grateful to live in this town, in this state, and in this country, that we need to open it up to more people. Kate, you said, we're really about including more people. The apathy with voters today is because they don't feel like their vote counts. And I think you're hearing that frustration here in the room, even in the way that people in this town feel. And I think we need to do that. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Marta online.
Hey there. I just wanted to say this is such a hard topic, and you guys are doing such a great job at really wonderful conversation. I've come into this like I've come into a number of topics, not really feeling sure how I feel. I do support the fact that everyone in town, regardless of whether they can be at a place on a certain date or, if they have childcare that they can't get away from or whatever, every voice is important. And so when I was hearing, talk about this open town meeting, I got really, really quite excited because it matches my values. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is we are in a different age of democracy than at any other point in our lives, and that is the age of disinformation. So one of the reasons I oppose important things being decided by Australian ballot is because of how easy it is to disseminate disinformation in this day and age. As a town rep, I learned about it from an article in the newspaper that I still wish I could find sometime around 2017 winter or something. It was maybe in the Voices in the Commons or the Reformer about what a beautiful form of government town meeting is. I'd lived here in the area. I kind of was aware of it, but that article kind of really inspired me to get up and join. And as I took it really seriously. I talk to people all the time in my daily life, every day about, town stuff, like how are you feeling? What's this effect on you? And a lot of people who lived here all their lives never even heard of RTM. So that was, I kind of tried to be the Johnny Appleseed. But it's also, I've been noticing in, local, state, and national politics and globally that disinformation and being able to find the source of a piece of information is more important than ever to democracy. You can have everyone vote and vote yourselves into an autocracy because of how easily disinformation and quickly disinformation is shared. And as much as we'd like to think we do not have one place that everyone in town reads. I mean, not a lot of people I know read the Reformer or the Commons. Maybe it's all just Facebook. I knew people whose kids were on swim team who didn't even know we were having a 1.5 year long conversation about the pool. So, we need a way to get correct information to every single resident in order for like an Australian ballot or like a full vote to really be the form of democracy that gives us the results that are true and honest to what our intentions are as far as what government is. And again, I don't really have a strong opinion on this topic. My only strong opinion is that if it's Australian ballot, that there are 3 or 4 large days of conversation at the library, or if it's an expanded town meeting, that we really have maybe 3 or 4 more informational sessions. Because even just recently, for voting on this budget, people have come to me and said, "Oh, you have to vote this way because this is true." And I said, "Wait, no. I go to select board meetings. I read everything. The facts that you're saying are not the facts." And I have to go back and dig the slideshows out from previous select boards to send people and stuff like that. Even people who I might agree with me for like the wrong reasons because they hear a piece of rumor and it spreads really fast. And again, I think that so there's this dichotomy between really wanting every single person's voice to be heard and making sure that people are voting in an informed ad they saw on Facebook or because they're in a Facebook group and they only get one side of the story and not the other. So as you make this decision, again, I just think Australian ballot for really nuanced things is a very, very difficult form of direct democracy. But an open town meeting or some kind of hybrid or an expansion of RTM, whatever you do, please keep in mind that we should really put into this charter so that it always happens ways to contact the entire town. We currently don't. We should get a quarterly budget for mailing postcards to every household. Like there have been people who lived here for decades and don't know that there's an election in March. It just doesn't. so making sure that whomever is making the decisions is as many people as possible. Also, that those people are able to operate off of correct information at each vote. And I got to say, the discussion is very, very important. I've changed my mind on a number of issues. I almost voted against the bond for Living Memorial Park until I sat and I heard everybody talking about all of the benefits and all the thought that went into the planning, and I changed my mind in that meeting. So those kinds of things where we don't always have all of the information to vote, doesn't seem like it's the best form of democracy. So whatever you do, I think RTM, the reason it kind of works now is because RTM members are encouraged to have 3-year terms, where over 3 years they learn all of the processes and all of the different levers of government. So when a kind of more nuanced vote comes up, they can have the understanding of what that vote will do. So if you make like a really big change and like it means that we will not have whomever is voting on it doesn't actually have all of the facts they need to make an informed vote, then I think we would just run ourselves into the ground.
Thank you, Marta. Yes.
Oh, Janet, Shredding, so I live in District 7. I just wanted to make 2 points. One is really ironic, considering that I was not a big fan of the convenience sample survey. But just to put out there, when you do a convenience sample, so it's not generalizable to the rest of the population, but you actually have more data. You have data from a broader, part of the population, which is through the vote. And the vote said very clearly that the people in Brattleboro don't feel represented by the RTM. The RTM did not respect what the voters suggested, which was they approve of the safety ordinance, and they wanted a lower amount of money going to human services. So you have 2 now data points. And once again, you cannot impute missing data based on your own bias. Like, oh, I know what other people would think because I'm in tune with them. I'm in tune with a lot of people too at the laundromat. And, they think like me. So I wanted to put that out there. The second point that I wanted to make is that, I hear a lot that there's this expertise involved. And the voters have been rational agents. They, I think, would put more money into safety, right? That's sort of what they were suggesting, maybe. And they would put less money to human services. That's what we all do in our budgets at home. We make decisions about how to balance our budget, and that's a balanced decision. So this hope that the RTM is, this expert organization that can really sort of fine tune sort of all of these questions, I don't see it. I mean, I don't see it. These are rational agents who are looking at their own pocketbook. And the last point I'll make for the criticism I hear is, oh, well, not enough people vote, so that's the problem. People don't vote because we don't listen to them. I mean, why, if you want to double the vote or triple it, put some of these big weighty issues on the ballot. And if you knew that your vote was gonna count, you'd get there. We would have a lot more people responding in an Australian ballot if it was a serious question and they cared. I could get all of my neighbors to go, for instance, and I'll bet you could get yours to go if it was really important and a seminal topic. So those are my strong points, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken.
Ken Fay, District 8 RTM member. To me, the key number is 29%, I think, of voter turnout in March or some number like that.
Yeah.
And that was an especially charged election. And to me, that really skews everything, because the voter in a very charged election, the disenfranchised is so high. And you're talking, I don't think it's RTM that caused them to not show up, because they also elected the select board. And so an individual was talking about hijacking the RTM, special interest. couldn't the select board also be, hijacked and select special interest? Why is the RTM being attacked, or not attacked, but looked at with this eye, and not the select board? To me, one is 5 and one is 140, but it's somewhat similar in my way of thinking. Also, being new to the area, I mean, it's a new novel concept, and I think it's a happy median in a way, because 29% aren't electing the representatives. What's going to make them? Do we think the people on the sidelines aren't voting because they don't want these representatives? Or I just don't understand that. But thank you, and thank you for all the work.
Howard, yes.
Yeah, Howard Burrows, District 7. I love the work you're doing. You guys are really going after it. I was part of the steering committee. We went after it for a year with about 20 people. And one thing we did was a survey. And it was an elaborate survey. Kate, I think, was responsible for it. And we got 102 people out of 140 that filled out that survey with comments. And it's full of useful information still. I think we ought to revisit that. Those people on the town, that are RTM members, they're devoted to what they do. Open meeting is not open. Open meeting lets a few loud people talk. Nobody gets to talk much. There's very little conversation. It's very hard to have an open meeting. The open meeting law is under review right now because it really discourages debate. And I think that's going to be changed. The idea of adding structure, I think, is a really good idea. I think the caucuses are wonderful. I don't think they should happen the day of the meeting. I think when we do district meetings, that should be really, most of the debate goes on in those district meetings. And anybody that needs to, that didn't run on the ballot, and I agree with having a lot more information about the people who do run, should be elected during those whatever they're calling meetings that happen not during RTM. Having a conversation with 140 people is really tough. So if we don't use those districts and district meetings topically around different issues so that we can really see who cares about what, I think that's going to get a lot more representation, a lot more people involved than we're going to get any other way. Anyway, I guess I'll quit, but I do want to say that Millicent's comment that it was a disaster in the steering committee, it was a disaster because we had a lot of very strong opinions and a lot of people that weren't good at being part of a conversation. But the idea that there was intense interest, I think, was wonderful.
Aaron Smith, District 7. So, I think that for RTM to be more effective, I believe a questionnaire or something like that of your positions and views would be warranted. We talk about engagement and not getting enough engagement. It wasn't until recently we even had a full slate of RTM. So opening the field to allow more people in, I don't think solves anything. We had the issue of filling seats to begin with. The caucusing day of for votes, I could pass on that, and have it some other way. But if you're trying to open it up to the masses, it is open to the masses. And right now, the only way for people to make their decisions on the RTM members are either know them or ask about their views. I mean, anybody who's on RTM, most of them don't have time to reach out to the entire community to say, this is where I stand. There's no podium to stand at and put your views out there. Now, if that was developed, I think that would be helpful for the entire community. I personally got involved with local politics at RTM probably 4 or 5 years ago because I was not happy with where it was going. I had no idea how anything worked. And I just stepped forward because I had what I viewed enough, and I needed to put my say out there. Now, I vote and make my decisions, I go to meetings and make my decisions on information I gather. I was at one at the library and totally changed my view. But if you were to ask me my views, it may change at the next meeting. So that if people are really concerned about who they are voting for RTM, I'm a big personal believer in personal responsibility. If people are concerned, get involved, and it takes some homework. I guess that's all I've got.
Thank you. Susan.
Susan Belleville, District 8. So I think that the idea of voting for RTM members, if the RTM model survives townwide vote and then survives the legislature and then survives the governor, I'd like to see it change so that the RTM members are voted in November. That gives them a time to get educated about the budget and the budget process before town meeting in March. I talked with a number of people that are not normally people I talk to. They were random conversations because of where I was sitting and who was around. And I found that I talked with at least 20 people, many of them had no idea what was in the town report. I was at meetings where information was shared about statistical stuff and counts on certain events. And people asked me where I got that. I said, it's in the town report. Electing an RTM, again, if it survives all of those steps, and electing an RTM member in November, those people should be engaged enough to learn the budget, learn the process, and be fully informed for an RTM meeting. But having said that, RTM in its current structure only represents about 1% of all of the eligible voters in the town of Brattleboro. I would feel it would be way more fair, and at the last election there were 24% of the eligible voters turned out to vote, to get a better representation of how the community as a whole feels. It would be much better to go to Australian ballot, because then it truly is one person, one vote. And if someone chooses not to go vote on the town matters at an Australian ballot, then they don't really have the right to gripe about it. If they don't like the outcome, they need to become involved. If they don't like what's happening, they need to become involved, like I've become involved. So that's my point. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we have Gary on the Zoom, and then I think everybody else is.
Yeah, I'm gonna have my camera. I'm just eating dinner now, just listening to everybody. And again, I appreciate you guys taking this time out to have this open discussion in regards to the future and of RTM and of the town. I guess my 3 questions probably would have summed it all up during the RTM steering committee. I did it pretty much on my own. The 3 question was, 1, do you know anything? Do you know anything about RTM? 2, if you are an RTM member, are you going to run again? And people that were on it before, why would you not run again? And I think those 3 questions alone could pretty much summarize from past, present, and future for RTM, pretty much knowing the importance, the community, and basically how the functionality of RTM is working from back then, from RTM to currently now. There's more ridership and interest now because of the current climate. Back then, it was just concerns about the meetings. Now we're more concerned about budgets, finances, and everything else. So people are showing more interest. So that being said, if something is growing, why would you want to stamp it out? So I think something like that, you should take a step back and think and consider. Even though you're saying, you know, you want to go to a town-wide vote, if you look at other committees in the town, how many people know these other committees even exist, let alone go on them unless word of mouth? Because obviously advertising is not, you know, one of the number one things that people are jumping aboard. They're more jumping aboard because of the important issues that are coming on the town that they're more concerned about. And now you're getting more ridership from young, old, new, and people who are showing vested interest. So that being said, maybe take a step back, I think, and reconsider and think about, wow, maybe we should give this time to grow before we just throw it away. And that's pretty much my bit. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Oh, Heidi Fisher, District 7, also a new RTM rep in the last, whatever, I was caucused in March, I think it was. I can see this going in any of the three ways or a hybrid of the three ways. I'm not really, don't have my eggs in any one of those baskets. But one thought that just came up in hearing a few of people talk about, I wonder if RTM remains, if it would help to have sort of before elections, before people got involved, thinking about RTM meeting here, come find out what your responsibilities are, what it feels like, what it looks like, whatever. And then have some sort of orientation for newly elected RTM members. Because I can say, I was obviously thrown into it being caucused in and then walking into a meeting. But it would have been incredibly helpful to have like some experienced RTM people of all opinions talk about how the process works, what you can expect, what's expected of you, all that kind of stuff.
Thank you.
We got the email from friends.
Oh, yeah.
Can we talk about that?
I don't
Well,
I don't know why that one's anymore.
Yeah,
than
we
any
got a
of the other
lot.
emails we got.
We just got,
That's true.
Myers was talking about an email someone sent us, but we had a whole bunch of emails. We don't want to highlight one email over the other bunches that we got. But they're all public, so Andy, yeah.
Oh, I'll be quick because I know I already had a chance to speak, but just wanted to respond to a couple of things. I personally have never tried to encourage somebody to get on RTM because they think like me. The thing I value of RTM, and I've said this before, it's a way to learn about the diversity of opinions in town. And I don't think it has been articulated in my presence that RTM members think they have specialized advanced knowledge or skill. I think that RTM members have made a commitment and are willing to be consistent in performing their duty. But I think anybody can step forward and do that. I don't think it's a kind of a platonic thing where you have smarter people run government. And there's a little evidence of that in our country anyway. And I know that it's come up tonight on a couple of occasions that town meeting went against the will of the voters. And I think that it's easy to focus on those hot issues. But there was also an unexpected, in the middle of the budget year, doubling of the solid waste costs, $500,000. There was also another rise in healthcare costs for town employees. We have a fully staffed police. We've always had some money saved because of an understaffed police. Our wonderful police chief has fully staffed our police, and we added officers. So we weren't ignoring the public safety thing at all. I had my own doubts about what happened in December, but I don't want to get into that. But I actually voted because I sensed the town was in favor of it. I personally voted for the ordinance and was disappointed that it was defeated. But I do think that when you're an RTM member, you see the whole budget. You spend time going over all the lines and not just a couple of issues that may be the top issues on the street corner. You look at all of it and you hear it. You hear that. you know, that budget defended by the select board, and you hear all that's gone into it and all the struggles that have gone into it, and you can't focus on one or two items. You have to look at the total budget. And it was a hard pill to swallow, but there weren't many ways out of it. With regard to the human services budget, I would have preferred to see it dropped, but we left it at 2. And if you look at that vote on the town meeting ballot, there was no absolutely ironclad way to interpret those results. People were interpreting it different ways because it was 4 different options, and it was a complicated thing, and everybody saw in it. And I think people felt safe to leave the number the way it was from the previous year. I don't think it was an attempt to override the public. I think it was unclear information, and people wanted to not. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to.
Andy Davis, by the way.
I just want to thank everybody from the public who's here tonight and expressed your opinions. And what I find really interesting is nobody agrees on absolutely everything.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of what we've been hearing consistently. So we're sort of grappling, but you've at least reminded me of a lot of things that we've heard and a lot of the things that we have to think about. So where would everyone like to go from here? Because we do want to leave tonight making a decision. And just to recap what Hannah said, whatever decision we make right now is just a big piece, or is one piece of a whole series of decisions that we'll make next. So you have to keep coming to the meetings. And it'll eventually go to a townwide vote because we already decided that whatever we decide will go to a townwide vote.
Kate, just on the process,
Oh, yes.
like we were talking about, that people don't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Now, I've gone in and read it, and I've talked to you, and I've talked to Peter, but maybe just for the public listening and the public that's here, just give the 30,000-foot view of those steps through the governor and the legislature, and just so everybody understands that, you know, what's going on.
Yeah, and there's a process that's set out by not us. It's through state statute, it's through our charter. So what we are here, as I said before, one of the ways that charter changes happen is by the select board appointing a charter revision commission. It's in the charter that they have to do this at least every 15 years. So that's how we came about. And what we've been doing is going through literally every single page of the charter. So some of the things we've done are little change this word or change that word or take out school board, or now, you know, we're looking at representative town meeting. We're looking at every single section of the charter. Once we get that done, we're going to present it to the citizens of the town of Brattleboro and say, do you like what we've recommending or don't you? You know, we're just 6 people. There's a whole thousands of more people. So the thousands of more people out there, or some form of town-wide acceptance or rejection will occur. Then it has to go to the Vermont legislature. And just because we all in Brattleboro want something, they don't have to do it. The first time we sent up the 16-year-old voting age amendment that was set up, that was done by petition actually. It was voted on, a group of people went out, got a petition to put it on the townwide ballot. Brattleboro voted to allow 16-year-olds to vote in municipal elections. That was a charter change. So it went up to the legislature. The legislature was like, heck no. So it had to go back again. So just because we want something doesn't mean the legislature is going to let us have it.
Can I just ask one
Yes.
quick question? So then is it a discrete question? So if you offer like some sort of or recommend some sort of hybrid or something that, I prefer the Australian ballot, right?
Yeah.
That's where my vote is.
Yeah.
But if you put it on the ballot, do you like the hybrid or do you want to stay where we are? Like, so is that my best choice then?
Well,
or do I get my
we're going to talk more about this next week, because what I'm about to say to you, no one else has heard except for Hannah, because we've been discussing the next step forward. So I don't want to get too down in the weeds about what I'm about to say, because there's other things involved. If we're gonna, if we're gonna, yeah, I was gonna say, if we're gonna get rid of town meeting.
So it is actually required by state statute that if we want to get rid of a representative form of town meeting, we have to put that on an Australian ballot for the whole town. And that is not something that then gets ratified by the legislature or the governor. That is just the townwide vote. And that would be to simply rescind the representative form of town meeting. And then after that, we would present a charter in full that would be voted on.
That would include the new form that we are recommending.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
But
So-
that's a little, but we don't need to have that discussion unless we decide to move
Yes.
forward
Yes.
with
So-
that.
yeah, so that's why I don't want to get too in the weeds with it, because there's a, if Brattleboro is unique, and that we're the only town in the state of Vermont that has representative town meeting. That's why we'd have to take a special vote to rescind it, or if we decided tonight we want to go with open town meeting, we would go to the select board and say, we want to have a special townwide vote to rescind representative town meeting. That would be the first step. This is just about the representative town meeting part. That would be the first step. Then we're going to present an entire charter to you folks, or to the town, or in some way the town's going to vote on it. That charter goes to the legislature. It has to go through the entire I'll take it to one second now. It goes through the entire legislative process. It'll have to go to the House and the Senate and through committees. They, along the way, may say, you know what, we don't agree. We put some language in that will allow the town of Brattleboro to generate revenue in other ways. A legislative committee may look at that and go, we don't like that. We're going to pull that out of the Brattleboro charter. So we could get the charter, the charter that we want could go to the legislature and come out with not a change, but it could come out with something taken out, and it could come with something they add in that we didn't ask them to add in. So that could happen. Then it goes to the governor. The governor could sit there and say, heck, I don't like that thing, I'm vetoing their charter. So it's really kind of frustrating, because all of us could want all of us, I mean, not just the six of us, our entire town could want something. And it could get to Montpelier and it could be changed. And they're gonna, so this is why we think this is a frustrating situation. It could there's a potential of it getting like even more frustrating for us as a town. Because you could have one legislative committee, you get 5 people in a room, they say, I've been, because, I don't know why, but I'm a total glutton for punishment, but I've been watching other, you can watch hearings for the legislative committees. I have been watching other towns' charters go through the charter revision process in House and Senate committees. And I see the people that come up from like the charter revision commissions on these committees, and they're having to defend an idea that their town all voted for. And I've seen some of these committees say, no, we're not, it doesn't get out of committee, an idea. And, I've watched, I think it was the town of Waterbury, that they went in and they knew there's gonna be one thing in this charter that this committee's not gonna like. And the committee stripped it out of their charter. So the probably mutual frustration may just begin after we all decide on what our charter wants to be. So then the governor has his say. So I think Tom wanted to, does that answer the question?
My only thing that because you didn't answer was that, what happens if Brattleboro votes down the charter? Like you put the whole charter up and the town says no.
Then we have to decide if we want to present another one or just, I don't know where we end, but I think we would maybe just have to give up.
I appreciate that you asked that question, because some of us are hearing for the first time that this would be a 2-step process.
That's why I didn't want to get into it.
Well, I understand, but
we're going to talk about it. What I'm saying, we're going to talk about it.
But I think there's a question, whether we answer it tonight or whether we answer it next week. if it has to be a two-step process, I'm going to assume for this moment that it does.
Yeah.
Then if we rescind the representative town meeting, and then the town doesn't approve the recommended new charter, where does it leave us for making these decisions next spring? I think we need to answer that question.
Yeah, we're going to answer that question.
Okay.
And
Stay tuned.
yeah. No, that's the question.
Yeah.
That's the question.
Can
And
I ask you a question about the process?
Yeah, I had, Dick, I
Go ahead.
got
Oh,
this
please,
person,
please.
sorry.
Yep.
Tom Grasso, Brattleboro resident. So this is great that you're sharing this information, and I think when it does come to a townwide vote, we need to, this is an opportunity that we have to inform the public about what they're deciding.
Yes.
Right? And I think what we're hearing a lot today is that a lot of people don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to create more work for you guys, but I think when a decision is, when you guys make your recommendation, we need to have some sort of communication in the newspapers of record of what it is. I mean, I've seen Fish's Vermontitude thing. I mean, that's all part of a democratic process that oftentimes gets ignored. And I think it's really important because otherwise we're going to end up in the same situation where people think one thing on Facebook and one thing on this social media thing.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to help out in any way on that, but I think that's fundamental. And if, again, going back to your point, Kate, about getting more people involved and more interested in voting and participating, they can't do it unless they actually know what it is that we're recommending.
Yeah, and just know that Maya and I went and studied how the 1984 changes were made. And we have the public PR thing that they did. I mean, they had inserts in the newspaper. I mean, they went, and of course this was before the age of social media too. So we understand the importance of getting out everything that we're going to recommend.
They also had 3 informational meetings about the charter.
Yeah.
One at each of the elementary schools.
Yeah. That's our goal is so you won't be able to go anywhere without knowing that there's a charter change going on.
If you'd come to all of our other meetings over the last 2.5 years, you'd know we've talked about that a lot.
Thanks, Dan.
My question, my memory's a little foggy, but I think I still have the comments from when I was the chair of the board, but it went to RTM for approval.
This is the thing. This is why I don't want to, we're going to have a separate discussion because we all haven't made the decision about how we're going to move forward with the vote. Do you see what I mean? I'm telling you, we know from Bob Fisher, our attorney, that if we decide here that we want to move something other than RTM, per state statute, we have to what's the word, dissolve RTM. But the only way to do that...
The representative form of government.
Yes, we have to dissolve the representative form of government. The only people that can dissolve the representative form of government are the people of the town of Brattleboro. So that's the one thing we know. But we as a group have not talked beyond that. That's the one thing we know, is that...
And this is on our agenda for next time.
I'll have to come to the next
We haven't talked to that. We haven't just not talked beyond that. We haven't actually talked to that. I think there's a really fundamental question, because one of the things we have talked a lot about is asking the select board. So in the current charter, there's 4 different ways to amend the charter, and the select board can put a question before all the voters of the town. The way that it typically happens for the recommendations from the Charter Revision Commissions is it goes to RTM. And we've been keen for the last couple of years to the idea that if we end up in a place where we're recommending something other than RTM, it doesn't make sense for RTM to be the ones who vote on that. And so in that instance, we would go to the select board and ask the select board to make it a town-wide vote. And forgive us for having this awkward moment in front of you, but it is an awkward moment. I have never heard up until now that it might have to be 2 separate votes in sequence, and I think that raises all kinds of questions for how we complete our work.
Well, that's why Hannah and I just talked to Bob Fisher yesterday about this, because I wanted to know what we were doing. What we would have to do, according to Bob, is have the select board, because they're the only ones that can put a question on the ballot. We'd have to go to the select board and say, if the idea is to no longer do representative town meeting, they'd have to do, we'd have to rescind it. There's have to be a special vote that says we are rescinding, or whatever the heck the word is, the representative, dissolving the representative form of government in the town of Brattleboro. So it's not like we just put a charter change forward and say we're gonna put it to open town meeting.
Okay.
Bob is telling us we have to do that, then we have to go forward with our charter changes.
So all I'm saying is, I'd like to have a conversation with Bob, at least a conversation with Hannah.
Yeah.
Potentially a conversation with Bob. I think there's, we need to understand based on what, and I trust that there's gonna be evidence of like, yeah, this is what the statute says, this is what our charter says, this is the way the two things work together. Whatever is gonna be the explanation.
Yeah.
But I am startled at this point in the process to hear it, because through all of our complicated conversations up to and including tonight around how we might move forward, and it might be something other than RTM, my expectation has been that when we land in a place and we bring it forward to the community to decide whether it's a good idea or whether we've messed it up, if the community says, no, you messed it up, then what we've got is what we currently have.
Right. Well,
But you're telling tonight that we might have to actually get rid of what we currently have before we get to go ask that question. I think that's a problem, and so we need to
right. And
look deeply at that
and
together.
Again, that's why I was like, yesterday, before this meeting, I wanted to understand this, so we had this conversation with Bob, like.
I'm not questioning that you've had the conversation, but I think it could fundamentally change much of what we've discussed tonight in terms of how we move
It
forward.
might change the way I feel
Right.
about
Right.
what I want to do in
Right.
terms of the form of meeting.
Right, right, no, I get that. I get that.
Okay.
I get that. And that wasn't ignored, like, and I didn't say this on purpose.
I-
It was like there was a,
Totally. I'm not alleging that. I am thinking, and we've been here for a few hours having this really rich conversation that might actually land us, this late-breaking news might land us in a quite different place from where we might otherwise have landed.
so, I'm kind of trying, I would like, one sec. I just want to figure out, how we move forward. Because we're not saying, I know, I totally get what you're saying.
Can I just,
Yeah.
for me, if one thing it changes is I don't want to have a vote tonight about
Right.
which
Yeah.
form of town meeting we
Right. Well,
prefer.
that's what I
I
was
think
about
it's
to ask
premature
you.
to do that. I think the next thing we should do is have an explanation either from Hannah, or preferably, no offense, but because you're
I'm
among
not
us,
here acting
preferably
as the
with
town
Bob.
attorney.
I'm sorry?
I'm not here acting as the town attorney.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we should hear from Bob about the why, and if it really is just plainly clear in the language of the law, it has to be these two steps. We've got a whole different thing to wrestle with, I think, than what we've been wrestling with.
Yeah.
So I think that's our critical path, is to get Bob in here to find out.
I understand, and I hear your concerns, but it's also not worth looking into any further if we're not going to consider
Right.
open town meeting.
Right.
If we're not going to consider getting rid of RTM.
Right.
So I think that we need to say that we want to
Right,
look into
right.
that, at least. Like, we need to say that we want to move forward in that direction.
Right.
But if the majority of the people here don't want to
Right.
get rid of RTM, then it's not worth
Right.
wasting anyone's time researching.
So several of us have expressed a preference for open town meeting without like voting open town meeting, not RTM, because we're still working our way through this process. And so based on that preference, I still feel that preference, but I don't know if I'm willing to vote for it anymore based on what we've learned tonight. So I believe that it's an absolutely necessary next step that Bob be here next week and we explore this issue, so we get to a place where we understand whether it really absolutely has to be a two-step thing, or whether there's maybe a way to like phrase it right, or do an additional step that would actually cause it to be able to be on one ballot. I don't know what the answer is going to be. I think we need to explore that, because if we can get back to following the path we thought we were on, we, in my opinion, have an array of options that is wider, and our decision-making can be more flexible. if it's really absolutely has to be these two steps, I think that for me, that inserts an enormous amount of caution to like, I need to understand what would be the implication if we did recommend that we move to open and the voters approved getting rid of RTM. And then we didn't get an approved charter in time before the next town meeting. What would that do? What kind of, just how would we make decisions, whether it's a ballot or an open meeting, if we've rescinded RTM and we get to next March?
Can I just quote the provision of the statute?
Right, that Bob was.
Just for the record, this is 17 VSA 2640A, sub D. A vote establishing a representative form of annual or special meeting shall remain in effect until the municipality votes to discontinue or establish a new representative form of annual or special meeting at an annual or special meeting duly warned for that purpose.
Yep. So my question to Bob will be, why can't that question be embedded in the one question we expected to ask of the public, which is, we've had this form of government, we now propose these changes. We propose that the 2016, whatever it is, charter be replaced by the 2026 charter. And in that replacement, we land with a different kind of town meeting. So by choosing that, in that action of the voters of Brattleboro, they have rescinded the representative town meeting. Why is that not sufficient under the law? And if it isn't, then I'm going to accept that. We're going to figure out how to navigate that. But that's, for the reasons we've already been naming, I don't need to repeat myself. There's just an enormous amount of risk in doing it in two steps. And we might not end up even traveling that path because of that, or I would only want to do that if we absolutely had to, and there's not a reasonable alternative interpretation.
I hear you.
You've got a question out here.
I think he's been up for a while.
Well, wait just one sec. Do you want to say something?
Yeah.
We're just grappling amongst ourselves for just a sec.
One of the things, if we have to do a two-step process, we are not going to have a charter before the legislature for the 2027.
Right, well, that's part of why I wanted to talk to Bob yesterday, because we were trying to figure out, is this like still a doable thing? I still think it's doable. I still think it's doable for us to get a charter.
Well, no, because we'd have to have two votes, and they'd have to be warned.
Yeah.
And we have to have informational meetings. And we're getting into November and December, which are not good times to have public meetings. And we have to have it to the legislature in December.
Yeah. But
we won't get a decision from the legislature in time to warn things properly for whatever the new system is to be, if there's to be a new system. I agree we need to unpack it next week, but we need Bob in the room, and we need to really push at this, in my opinion. We may land in a place where he said, look, it says what it says, and there's no way for us to get around that. And okay, but I think we need to push at it and talk about it, and what if we did this, what if we did that, and before we do any further discussion about actually deciding whether or not to move away from representative town meeting, because
Question, Kate?
Join.
Would you, I'm not necessarily against a preliminary vote of the commission tonight. I'm not necessarily against it. I wouldn't love it because of the information that's still needed. But would you remind the commission, we had a goal at the very beginning of having better than a majority,
right,
to make sure that what we put forward is something that others can stand behind as well. And would you remind me, if you recall, we wanted 100% vote on everything. We generally have, because they have
It's
been
been
lower,
simple.
they have been lower
Simple.
stake items that we've
Right,
been able to
right.
move along.
Right.
But I think for me to know if I would get behind a preliminary vote tonight is to know what the final, the hope, the goal of the promise we tried to make to each other was.
I don't know if we ever promised that we'd be all on the same page.
No.
Do you know what I mean? I know what you're referring to. And
We said.
We did have that conversation. My recollection of where we
consensus.
landed was that we would always strive for that, and that if it requires more time and more discussion, we're all invested in giving it more time and more discussion. But if we land in a place ultimately where it's not all 6 of us agreeing, then it takes 4 people to decide which way we go. That's my recollection.
Yeah.
We should probably check some minutes.
Yeah, but I think it was, we're not gonna, I don't wanna say guilt each other. You know what I mean? I think we're not gonna judge each other based on,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Because we are working through it together. We
Yes.
have gone on
Yes.
a journey together.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
then I think it is helpful again for others to hear
Yeah.
that we strive for consensus, but if
It's
we
not
don't
required.
get it, it is not required.
Right. And I hear, Peter, I hear what you're saying. And I don't want you guys to think like Hannah and I were like withholding info in any way.
Yeah.
Like yesterday, like we met with Bob.
At 3 o'clock yesterday.
Yes, 3 o'clock yesterday,
Yeah.
because I was worried about, this is what I was worried about, like what's
Sure.
next
Sure.
for us.
Can I be unequivocally clear? I don't think you did anything wrong. I'm not mad at you. But I feel very strongly that we should just stop and not have a preliminary vote.
Yeah.
Certainly not have anything more than a preliminary
Yeah.
vote until those of us who haven't known about
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
chew on it like you have for only 24 hours, but still
Yeah.
like understand that it's a thing.
Yeah.
And better yet, we have a meeting 1 week, less than 1 week actually.
Yes.
You know, 6 days from now, we have another meeting.
Yeah.
I'd love for Bob to be here so we can actually focus intensely on this and get to a place.
Yeah.
And once we're in that place,
Yeah.
that informs really substantively, I believe, the decision that we will make around form of town meeting.
Yeah, and the one thing too, and this is just to, again, we all may have this conversation and everyone will disagree with me, and maybe Hannah disagrees with me. I did not hear Bob say anything that made me worried that we could not get this to the legislature in January.
Me either.
You know,
Getting it there in January, but we can't get a decision from the legislature
Right, no,
by
I-
January when the March town meetings are gonna have to be warned.
no, I hear that. I just want Maya to know that there's no reason I heard that we could not get this to the legislature by January or December.
If we keep pushing these
Right.
decisions off, then maybe, but I
Well,
understand it's a big decision.
My concern, quite honestly, is we make the decision to do away with RTM, let's say, okay? And then we have to educate everybody before we have a vote. You know, the select board will put it on a ballot, we'll have a special election.
Yeah.
And we'll have to I don't know how long it will take Hillary to arrange to have a special election, but it's not gonna be immediate. We have to have educational meetings to explain to people what's going on and what they're gonna be voting on and why we did it. And then depending upon how the vote turns out, we have to fix the charter.
But we can be fixing the charter, well, we can get into this next week, because we can be, if next week we decide, say we decide we're not going with RTM, I'm not saying that's what we're gonna decide. We can be working on what the new plan is as we're working up to the vote.
Well, we don't know whether the town will say,
Right.
no, we want to keep RTM.
Right.
Well, and even if the town votes to rescind RTM, And we've been continuing to work in the meantime, and then we bring something forward, even if it's on the calendar that we've all been planning for. So like our expectation is we would finish our work by the end of the summer, or there would be some informational meetings and a special election to be held in the fall, heading to early winter. So there's plenty of time in advance of January that this gets sent out for the legislature.
Yeah.
And I think that all makes really perfect sense, except for this wrinkle, because even if it all went exactly as we had planned, if we get to a place where, whatever time frame it is, October or November probably, if the voters of the town have already rescinded town meeting, representative town meeting, and don't approve the recommended new charter, we're sunk. We don't know how, unless there's a default thing that Bob is going to be able to tell us.
I think there is a default. There are a lot of towns that do not have charters that have open town meeting.
Right.
I can't say that for sure because I haven't looked at it, but I think that we would just default to state statute, and we can discuss that further, but I just want to reiterate that it would be helpful to at least know that we want to look into this, that we want to, and I think that we are, but we haven't actually like made a definitive yes, let's see what we need to do to make this happen. I'm not saying we need to make a decision, yes or no. I'm just saying we need to say, I think we all need to say yes, we want to look into this further before we take that next step of figuring out what would happen in this situation. Because if we're not going to even go there, then it doesn't matter.
So does the old charter not stand until a new charter is in place?
It does.
Yeah. And I think the glitch here is if we rescind representative town meeting, which is in our current charter.
Oh, okay.
And what's the default for doing that for March? Which is that's what we need to hear from Bob Fisher.
Yeah.
And of course, we're not left, as Hannah just said, there are towns with charters that have open town meeting. So
Without charters.
Towns without charters. So there's a default to this situation. I think what we just need to get Bob Fisher in here so that we're all clear on what it is. That's where we are right now. And I totally get what you're saying, but I get what Hannah's saying, that I'm assuming, I think what Hannah's trying to say, and you can tell me, no, this is not what you're trying to say, if we're going to stick with representative town meeting, then this is like a moot point anyway.
Yeah.
But I think some people are uncomfortable at this point saying either way, open or representative town meeting, until they get the answer from Bob Fisher.
We've already done kind of a straw poll, and there were more than 3 people who were leaning towards open town meeting. It just doesn't feel to me like, we can have a more formal straw poll and commit ourselves in front of our constituents, and that's fine.
Yeah.
If we're forced to do that, I'll say my preference is open town meeting. And it just doesn't, I don't understand why that's necessary in order to get us to next Wednesday night to have a conversation with Bob to understand this really important new wrinkle that's popped up.
Yeah. Because I do feel like I feel I have an understanding where most people are. And if I don't understand where you are, that's not bad either. But I do think, based on what I'm hearing, moving forward with the conversation with Bob is going to be helpful based on everything we've just heard from each other, which is if the preference would be for the majority of us right now to go with open town meeting, which means the conversation with Bob next week is relevant.
I just want to have us say the preference is to continue with those conversations and see what would happen if we were to not even say open town meeting, just to get rid of representative town meeting. And I feel like I have a sense of that, but I sometimes feel like I have a sense of how people are feeling, and then it goes completely differently. So that's why I'm just saying it would be are we all in agreement that we want to have Bob look into this?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So let me ask you this.
Yeah, that's the answer, yes.
The way that Peter's talking, there's a consensus to go to open meeting.
Yeah.
Hear me out. And we have an informational meeting, so my first question to you is, well, what does that open meeting consist of? You've heard a lot of various opinions here this evening, and I'm gonna wanna know all the nuances of what that means before I go and cast my vote to do away with it. And that work is all gonna be done?
That's gonna be done, that's gonna be done. We have, believe it or not, like giant lists of and every time somebody says, what about this? I write it down, and I have this giant spreadsheet. We have a giant spreadsheet of things, whether it's representative town meeting, whether it's open town meeting, whether it's Australian ballot, whether it's, you know, what people want from this, you know, everything in the charter, because of lots of things we talk about, but because of what we hear from you folks, we have a running list of things that need to be answered. We actually have a chart, which it's on the town website, that we had Bob Fisher work with us on everything that happens in representative town meeting now. Can it happen with an open town meeting, and can it do it by Australian ballots? We've gone through like this chart saying, and that's how we know some of the stuff we're doing right now we don't have to do. So whatever we recommend, we're not just gonna go to open town meeting, you know, free for all.
And from those of you here tonight, and from other people, and from some of our own conversations, yeah, there's going to have to be better definition whether we stick with RTM or whether we move to open town meeting. That'll be for the in-person portion. And we already have hybrid. We've talked about that. We just don't think of it as hybrid because we do such a limited amount of business on the ballot. But there'll be a question of how much goes to the ballot. There'll be a question of which things don't have to be dealt with at all because they're dealt with differently in the charter. There's all these different things, some of which we've talked about tonight and some of which we haven't. Working Kate's list, etc. So we land in a place where a few months from now, we're able to be really explicitly clear.
Yeah.
Like, this is the part that would be done in the in-person meeting, whichever kind of in-person meeting it might be. And this is stuff that might go onto the ballot that hasn't been going onto the ballot. And if there's any other nuances that I'm not able to name in this moment, there certainly will be some items that we've been doing in representative town meeting every year that won't be dealt with by the voters anymore in any way because they just don't need to be. And so we'll be recommending that some of those things just get put into the charter to empower either the select board or the town manager or some other manner that things happen. And you'll see all of those as well and get to pass judgment on whether that makes sense to you. But our intention is, regardless of where we land on this question of in-person meeting, to then better define all those different pieces so that when it comes out for townwide vote, it's really clear what would be different than it is today.
A long answer for a quick question.
Hold on one sec. I think Howard wanted to say something.
Yeah, I didn't finish what I was saying, unfortunately. Open meeting is, I work for National Science Federation, so I've done this a lot. And I know open meetings don't really allow you to represent all the people. It sounds really good, but they don't really get a chance to participate. Even in a town with 300 people, a town with 12,000 people, it's 10 times worse. The only thing worse than that, I think, and I'm questioning that, is the Australian ballot. That's like going into a town meeting and saying, okay, we call a question. You never get deliberation. You really never get public participation. They just go to the vote. And they haven't been part of the deliberation. That's the worst. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, so do we feel like,
you know,
oh, yeah, let's go to Zoom.
Timothy Belknap, RTM 9. I would just highly recommend not putting any surprises in there, pushing surprises one way or the other regarding contentious items. That's all. That's all my feedback there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So do we feel like we know, we'll get Bob to get here, figure out that portion of it so we're all comfortable with that, and then we make a decision one way or another, and we move forward. And I don't want I don't want us to stress about the schedule like tonight, because like, I don't want Maya to lose sleep over the schedule tonight. Like, we'll lose sleep next week when we have it all, like, we have it, because I just want us to remind us that we've done a lot of work, even though we still have a lot of work to do. Like, the bulk of, like, the big stuff, we've really been doing a lot of stuff, and we have to do a lot more stuff, but I don't know, maybe I'm being Pollyanna-ish, but I think we can get it done. Sure. I think we can. And we did have,
I would also like to ask Hillary.
Yes, I'm gonna.
Before the next meeting.
Yeah.
How long it takes
Yeah.
to do an election.
Yeah, she's on the list of talking to.
And I'd like to know that before Thursday.
Yeah.
Wednesday, in fact.
Wednesday. Wednesday.
Yeah.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Christina, District 8. I just wanted to, okay, first of all, holy moly, are you guys getting paid or something? Can we bake you things? I cannot believe how much work you are putting into this, and yeah, you need a free tire change from the house. But also, I hope you look at this not as a wrinkle, but as a speed bump. And I hope that you realize the speed bump is there because you're dismantling our representative system of government. And I hope that you don't try and still stay on the same timeline if it involves rushing this at all. This speed bump is there for a reason, and I also heard someone else, just one more thing to reflect back, the idea of consensus, and that was, one of you mentioned it, and then it sort of was like, nah. So just reflecting that back to you guys, that this is a major dismantling of our municipal government, and that's a speed bump, not a wrinkle.
And please be assured, I'm not one to rush stuff. I want to make sure it's done well. I've looked at this calendar like a bazillion times, and I'm like, we've done a lot of work. What is it that we have left? And what is it that we have to go, and what are we shooting for? And again, I may be being Pollyanna, and, but I have this giant checklist, and like, ooh, we did this, so I'm seeing like stuff being done off the checklist. That's
I
making me.
understand that, but,
we want to do it right.
But having informational meetings in August is not a good idea. People aren't here.
Yeah, we're going to make sure we do it right, don't worry. Tom?
Yeah, just on the process, first of all, this is a charter review commission. It's not dismantling the government. And the fact that you have to talk to the town attorney is an important step in the process for the charter review commission.
Yeah.
It's not a speed bump.
Yeah.
It's not you just have to do it. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. And luckily, we have a nice town attorney who consults with us.
And we may land in a place where our whole body of work has become substantially more complicated, and we may not stick to the original timeline. But those are decisions we'll make as we become better informed after we've had a chance to confer with the attorney.
Yeah. And I'm not wedded to sticking to the timeline we have. I'm just saying, like, maybe it's just me being Pollyanna-ish and getting excited that we've checked so many things off the list that I'm feeling like we can do it. But I could be totally wrong. We'll go to Gary, then we'll come back.
I guess it's probably easier to come in person. Question, besides dismantling, dissolving, disbanding, and disevolving yourselves from this, you could also hibernate it for a while, put it to sleep and see. I mean, that's a good terminology to put it as other committees have been, you can figure out what direction. That was happening, I believe, I don't know if you remember that, Kate, with the steering committee. It was hibernating until people figured out later on if they wanted to take it in another direction. That being said, I kind of like what Tom said, but in the process of doing that, you can list the pros and cons of each one for town meeting versus representative town meeting, so people who don't know or understand how it works, they can get a better understanding before they vote. It gives people a point of reference to basically articulate what it is they are taking apart and what they're dissolving and what they want to keep. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And I just want to direct anybody who wants more information about the difference between representative town meeting, open town meeting, or Australian ballot. Peter and Joy worked hard putting together information that is on our charter revision webpage that we did in advance of our March 31st meeting, so people can look at that too, Randy.
All I would say is I think you're going about it correctly. I think it has to be efficient, it has to be meticulous to get where you want to go. When you get there, I think you had great concerns about how do we inform everybody. 2025, 2026, whenever this happens, that message should be by all of you standing in front of a camera before any of those informational meetings ever occur, and talk about it. Break it into parts if each of you have an expertise at a part or however you want to do it, but then promote that. Have the newspapers say, go here, watch it. Have the town government do it. So that when people come to wherever these meetings are going to be at the 3 elementary schools, at least they have the chance to already have a knowledge base so that they know and are informed of what questions they should be asking. And you know, I think we end up in a better place if we do that.
Yeah, yeah. No, we agree, and I think that's why we are always happy that BCTV tapes our meetings so that people can.
Well, I meant as
Oh no, I see what. Oh, I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
totally.
yeah,
I'm just saying, like, we're into that too,
Yeah.
because it's like we want as many people to know that we exist, and we're excited when people actually show up at our meetings, and it doesn't do us any good not to have people understand all the work we've been doing that impacts everybody in this town. So we're 100% with you.
Because like I said previously, some people learn in different ways. So it's great that it's up in writing. You know, I love analytics. But some people are visual learners, and by just seeing and explaining and hand gesturing, that gets through to some more people. So I would think that would be an awesome thing if you guys could do that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so is there anything else we need to talk about tonight? We're coming back on Wednesday.
No, make a motion, we adjourn.
Maya makes a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? All right, so everybody come back next Wednesday at 6:15.